fine. I don't even need to do anything. I just figured just Karen could introduce the bunker and everything.
What's up to you? She thought maybe you had like an announcement or something. Look, I'm shy. You would be the star.
No, I'm totally shy.
Are you?
Oh yeah. I know. I put on a good front. Now I'm screaming on the inside.
Okay.
So yeah, I already started it.
Okay.
So that gives people a chance to kind of start coming in to see it, you know.
So with this one.
Perfect. And I'll just follow you guys around.
And then there will be a couple in here. And then we'll start and go around that way and with Kate.
Excellent.
Hey! Hi!
How are you?
I'm going to get interested in chairs. Do we need to bring chairs anywhere? People that ladies in what way? Do you want a chair?
True.
This is what I'm saying.
Are you ready to start the birthday party?
I'm ready whenever you are.
We're ready to start the birthday party.
Just need this water already.
So, because we want you to do the introduction.
I was gonna let you do it. You're so much better than I am. You know it's true.
Okay, let's just do it right now. Okay. And then we'll move into another artist. Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in. My name is Art by E. Lewis. We are now live right here at the Bunker Center for the Arts, which is located at 1014 East 19th Street, right off Truce. If you go underneath the bridge, you went too far, so back on up. But here we are here with MOFA. We have an exhibit here at the Bunker, and we're going to have an artist talk today. So thank you all for tuning in. So you're going to get a chance to hear all of the artists talk about their pieces and the process they put into it. Becky, are you here? Becky? Drum roll, please. She's getting in the chair. And the crowd goes wild.
She's tracking down the chair.
She's tracking down the chair?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Becky's tracking down the chair. But so with that being said, TJ is the cameraman, and then there's Dove, who's the gallery assistant. Look at her, she perks all over the camera. So anytime you come to the Bunker, of course, you will see Dove, and she will greet you and assist you with touring of the Bunker. As you see, all the ladies are loading in. Miss Becky, can you please come join me?
Certainly.
Smile for the camera. So I have the honor of working with Miss Becky. Somehow, some way, they roped me into being the president. Ain't nobody said nothing. But Becky has been the president, so I'm honored to co with her and assist the group with growing within today's society. And just so everybody can have much more appreciation for the arts. I don't think people really appreciate fiber artists in the manner that they need to. You wear our fiber on your back every day. But to have the opportunity to have fiber, and along with other arts, not to knock anyone else, but fiber arts, I think, is very important because TJ's a painter, so it's Dove. I love y'all. We're fun. We're fun. We're keeping it real. This is not script. This is just me being normal with the group. So I'm going to let Becky do an introduction, say hi, do what you do, and then we're going to take a tour around the gallery, and each one of the artists who have submitted a piece, they are going to talk about their process and what they've done. So, Becky.
All right. So I'm Becky Stevens, and I'm the Vice President of MOFA, Missouri Fiber Artists. And I really like doing projects with the group. We have about 125 members, and they're spread all over Missouri. And outside of Missouri, we have members in the border states and as far away as Alaska. We had 2 people from Alaska join us this past time, and one of their pieces is in the gallery. And my friend Marielle Musa, my collaborator, and I dreamed up this idea that we wanted to have something that would bring the community of fiber artists in Missouri fiber artists together, and also get them some professional development at the same time. So we had this idea that we would all make a book, and we had Jennifer Rice. She is from, where does she live now? Virginia, I think. She did an online workshop with us once a month to help us better develop our artist statements and our bios and all that. And at the same time, we were all making books, and we paired up. And you were just supposed to bounce ideas off your partner. They didn't work together in partners. But at the end, we were like, this is a great group of book arts, and we would like to have an exhibit in TJ was willing, so here we are. So the parameters were wide open. It was like book, however you see a book. So some of them are not in a page format that you're used to. So that's kind of fun. So our first speaker is going to be Jennifer Wax. She's from Columbia, Missouri.
So I guess that was my introduction. I'm Jennifer Wax from Columbia, Missouri. And my work in this piece entitled Album is inspired by personal stories, family lore, and memory. And here I've combined representational imagery with ephemeral elements to tell a story. I've always been the family archivist, and I'm interested in preserving connections to the past and documenting the passage of time. And I use textiles and materials and techniques that I learned about when I was a child and have reconsidered as an adult. Sometimes a song lyric, an environmental issue, or a meaningful place find their way into my work. And themes I explore are universal with layers of personal meaning. The layers are created with hand-dyed and repurposed textiles. Photo transfer, memory-triggering details, and collected materials are often incorporated. Meditative hand stitching and sometimes free motion embroidery create line and add texture. I hold the layers together with fusing techniques, more stitching and more quilting. The color scheme is often muted, as I used here, and subdued with a dreamlike quality. This series was inspired by Louise Bourgeois, and she made some cloth books that hung on the walls of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City in 2017, and I happened to see that show. Louise worked until she was 97, and in the cloth book she created at the end of her life, she used fragments from her own clothing to make the pages. The advantage of a cloth book is that it has buttonholes, and it can be added to whenever I get inspired again, and it can be stored in a box or hung on a wall. Boxes of paper memorabilia and fabric, like we all have, are likely to be discarded by family members after I'm gone. But I hope that the textile art that visually reflects my story and our story will remain. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the pages. This is the cover, and I looked at old albums, old photo albums that people have with the cardboard pages to get an idea for the cover. This first page is about my mother, and I just happened to find an envelope tucked in her things that had all of these pictures of her taken at a photo booth from junior high to college. And in them, she has a different hat on in almost every photo. And I knew she left them there for me. So when I found this envelope, I knew it was meant for me to do something with it. And this leather notebook I still have, and it's actually this size. And she carried that from high school to graduate school. And when I was a little girl, she was in graduate school. And I remember her walking with this little notebook tucked under her arm. So I've photocopied that, printed on fabric, and these are images of my mother. This lace is from one of her outfits. And it might be in one of the pictures too. I have 4 grandchildren now, and so there's a page for each grandchild. And I love saving their art, but my files are getting really big. So I kind of narrowed it down and picked a few of my favorites. This is Jonah. He did this when he was 5, this little dragon. This is from Calliope, who wrote this in her journal after she visited us in Missouri during the pandemic. And I thought it was really beautifully written. And I wanted to save that little handwriting that she had. We went to the sunflower field. Then there's Chloe, who is a fan of cats and a big drawer. And this is her cat. And the last one is Moses. And during the pandemic, we did Zoom art lessons. And the little dots are some things that he had painted while I was talking to him on Zoom. And the dinosaur is his favorite thing, of course. He's 5. So I hand stitched over all his little marks. The last one I'll talk about is this one. I happen to have a file for each of my kids, actually a whole file drawer from 1st grade, 2nd grade. So I had a little bit of everything. But I found examples of their handwriting from 1st grade. I found their little drawing that they did of themselves, like a little self-portrait from first grade, and I had their handprints. So I was able to combine all of that and symbolized my 3 sons, who are now 38 to 42. But this is probably a favorite of mine. This represents our family, and my dad is here. The dress my aunt made for me when I was 1, and my husband is represented by these maps here. And that's the story of my book, and I hope to add to it because I have a lot more people to think about.
That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really great.
Thanks. Any questions? Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of getting, like the photos on the fabric?
Oh, okay. So I just do it on a printer, and I just found a booklet for my printer. My printer's 10 years old. It's just a little HP printer. So I adhere the fabric to freezer paper and run it through the printer. And most of the times it works. Sometimes I have to fool with it a little bit. I don't know when I get a new printer if I'll have such luck that I do right now. So I play with the photos quite a bit and manipulate them and then run them through. Thank you. Who's next?
I think Annie Webster back in the other room.
Hello, I'm Annie Webster. I'm a fiber artist here in Kansas City. And my piece for this project is called Summer of 21. It's a book that features flowers from my garden last summer. And it also features a technique that I learned last summer. It's a new to me eco-printing technique that uses a heat press. And I brought a picture because no one knows what a heat press looks like. So here, you can get a swipe that from Amazon. People generally use these for putting vinyl transfers on t-shirts. But in this class that was taught by Jane Dunewald, we are smashing our flowers down here with heat and water to get the image transfer. Brought a little tiny example of how the setup works. The heat press gets hot on the top. I think it's about 310 degrees is what I set it at. And it takes like 4 minutes to transfer the image. I've got some Teflon, a couple layers of felt that are wet because you need moisture to get the image to transfer. I've got my little reliable Coreopsis from my garden. This one's already been printed. This is what I'm experimenting with now, are tea bags. And you can kind of see the image there. They got kind of blobby, but that's all right. So then that goes in, felt Teflon. And then it is smashed down really hard in that heat press for about 4 minutes. And it's, oh, there's a bug in there. Sorry. Sometimes the flowers work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you need to add a little iron to get some color, sometimes you don't. It's a lot of experimentation, a lot of, oh, that did not turn out well at all. And then there's a lot of rescuing projects. And that honestly is a lot of what this book is. I don't like to get rid of any fabric that I've done something to. And I found I had trouble getting the cotton to accept the image transfer as well as I did on like watercolor paper. So the way I solved the problem of the images not transferring quite as well as I would like is to add embroidery. So if you have to get in here kind of close to see that there's some purple basil that is in there. That's what the leaves are. And the marigold over there didn't transfer very well, so I just filled that in with stitching. Not a lot stayed on this one, the Coreopsis print beautifully, so I use them a lot. But there wasn't a lot here, so I tried to fill it in as much as possible. The background colors on a lot of these are from tissue paper or construction paper. The fabric really sucks them up well. These were lavender with a lace background that I dipped in some kind of dye. I don't remember what kind. And a lot of it, this one was piecing things together too, from little bits that printed well or didn't print well. I just put them together. And to give the book a little bit more structure, I used fusible interface, a little lighter on the inside for the pages, a little heavier for the cover. But yeah, it's preserving the colors as long as I can. People ask a lot, will it fade? And probably it'll fade, and that's okay with me. I like the impermanence of it. That's why I add the embroidery, so there'll still be something there. And I tend to use the commercially available embroidery flosses for that reason. So you'll still have some of the color there.
That's outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Julie Reed, and I'm a graphic designer, but I've been working a lot in textiles and fibers lately, and this is probably the one piece that I started with. I'm actually I'm a trained illustrator, and I've done almost my whole career in that manner, either designing things or making product. And so for me, the fine art parts of things are just, it's just something foreign for me. But anyway, this piece is actually made of tongue depressors. They're extra jumbo large ones for elderly people, I think. And I think, I don't know, I like using things that are easily found and kind of changing what they are used for, or kind of taking something really simple and making it into something beautiful. So that's always kind of an underlying theme of most of my work. But these are actually made by the tongue depressors are laser cut, and I usually start out with a sketch, and I'll do like little drawings of the different colors and things like that on it to determine if I think it's going to work or not. And then I will take them to the laser cutter after I make my digital files, and then I'll cut them there, and then I'll come home and I'll start stitching away. So and I find it a really relaxing process in some ways, because it's I just find that you can almost take the same design over and over again, and you just keep getting something different. So I like the aspect of that. And I'm also a big collector, so I love old Victorian needlework things, whether it be like old pin cushions, or I actually like most of the Victorian craft type of work, like Victorian hair work, for instance. I'm very interested in that as well. And I love the way they used to make like swatch books. If you had a company or something like that and you were selling your buttons, and they'd have this giant book that they took around, salesman sample or something, and if I ever find those things, I just scoop them up. So, and I love the old Victorian samplers that the little girls used to make when they were like 4 or 5. And so that's kind of how this came about, is that how do I like that organization, I think. So this I look at as kind of a modern day sampler. And I've actually made this is my artist book, but I've also made some now that are more of a beginner's, like learn to embroider. So that's my product development like thingy coming out. I just can't seem to squelch that. So, but anyway, I think that's about as much as I can explain about all this. Although one extra thing, I guess, I do think that the pandemic kind of made me start thinking about just everything seems so out of control. You couldn't leave your house, you couldn't do what you normally did, and not that that changed my life really that much, because I'm a freelance worker from home. So, however, it just seemed so like chaotic, and I found myself kind of like just kind of sometimes almost frozen, just standing there. And I think that like just picking up one of these and working on it, it was really kind of calming, and it gave me kind of a sense of serenity. And also, at the end, I've got something, this all folds up into a little paint swatch thing. And, I guess I had some control over this one little thing in my life. So that's any questions? Or no?
What's the mechanism that holds it all together?
Oh, it's I can show you this if you want. I actually have a magnet back there. That's not on most of them, but it's what's called a screw. It's something that they use in like scrapbooks and things like that. A screw post. Thank you. Yes, because it's actually really difficult to find, and especially when you don't know what it's called. and I have a lot of excitement going on, like when I head to the hardware store and I try to explain what it is.
What did you use to do the laser cuts?
Oh, I have access to a laser cutter at the library at a makerspace. So I've been going there for like 5 years now, and I make jewelry there too. It's a wonderful, if you get a chance, definitely. We have 2 big makerspaces here in Kansas City, and they're just amazing. So.
Is it the Kansas City Library?
There's one at the Central Resource Library, Johnson County, and then the other one is in Olathe at Indian Creek Library. But they've got embroidery machines, they've got wonderful sewing machines, they've got a large format printer, 3D printers, and the people to show you how to do it. So they're great. Anybody else? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leandra Spangler, and this is my scroll, and that's a form of a book. Except I didn't roll it up the traditional way because you couldn't see anything. So I had to figure out a way to make it visually interesting and not be 5 yards long, because it is 5 yards long. I began by searching my stash. I knew I wanted to talk about the pandemic, so thank you for mentioning that, Julie. I went underground and I hid. And I didn't go out of the house for many, many, many months. And I found that frustrating, but also it was empowering because I was protecting myself. And I'm still freaked out about crowds, so I may get over it eventually. But this was my process of working through my fears and my anger and all of those things that I was feeling for the last 2.5 years. I began by making a list of all of the pandemic words that had come into our collective vocabulary. I printed them on fabric, and then I watercolored around the words so that they weren't just white Band-Aids, that I was going to include. So I, cut them all out, and I have these to pick from as elements. I also am a gatherer of fabrics. Can't imagine that that's a shock to anybody. So I wanted to layer, especially with transparencies, so that you could see the depth of what our experience was. And I don't know if anybody else's pandemic experience can be seen here, but this is mine, okay? There's a lot of symbols maybe, or icons that relate to time. There's suns and moons and things that could be clock-like, because this thing just went on and on. Once, and I did stitch on a roll of burlap ribbon, and it was white, which I thought was a good backing. You know, a grid is so stable in all of our experiences, but not one made out of burlap. So it squished and moved as I stitched on it, which I thought was just really cool, because our world was not stable. And so you can tell I was traumatized, apparently. So anyway, this was 5 yards long, and I rolled it all the way across my living room, and I thought, how am I going to show this? Because I can't figure out, you know, how to hang it from the wall and go out. I remembered that at Quilt National several years ago, there was a quilt that was hung on a curtain rod, and it was an accordion. And I had cleverly taken pictures of the way it was constructed, you know, going up like this and taking pictures of the back. So I pulled those out and figured it out. So the back is also decorated because I folded my 5 yards in half. Then I had just 2.5 yards to reduce down to 1 yard, because this is now 36 inches. Pretty much of a miraculous accomplishment. So, I could go on forever, but I'm going to stop and answer your question.
Does it have to read horizontally? Could it read vertically?
It could.
So like I could see it coming from higher point and then rolling out onto the floor in space. So there's a lot of other ways you could make it.
Absolutely, and it's dismantleable.
Yeah.
There's clips on there, and there's a flap that the stick goes into. There's a yardstick that is holding it up, and so you can pull it off and wear it as a scarf. Other questions? We'll see.
How long did it take you? How long was the process?
I think I started it, wasn't it in February?
I think so,
Yeah. And I just stitched and stitched. And it was very meditative. And it was very kind of cathartic, you know, because I was thinking and talking to myself and stabbing into my felt, cover, my ironing felt, you know, for quilting. So I think it got a lot of my emotional stuff out there. I'm not saying I still don't have it, but anyway, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll head into the next room now.
There's chairs in the other room.
Yeah, you can leave these. Set my phone there. Go here next. We don't need any more chairs.
Okay.
We're like, we're chair rich. All right, so I'll just go ahead. The next book is mine. I'm Becky Stevens again. And mine is just a simple bound book. I made it out of paper. I really like the look of fabric and paper that mimics stuff in nature, and I wanted to give it kind of an ancient feel, like it was something from history. So I laid out a lot of paper. It was a ridiculous amount of paper. I think I had like sheets 8 feet long, and then I put steel wool on it, sprayed it with some vinegar, and just layered. Put some fabric in there, because if you're going to rust dye, you should just do a lot, because so you have choices. And just left it for a couple days, came back to my studio, and then it was, and that's how I got the background color. And it's really interesting, I thought, how some of them worked as a resist, the little pieces of steel wool, and then some of them gave color, the dark red. And then it just kind of bled everywhere. And I like to use really thin coating of encaustic, which is beeswax and damar resin. And so this is very thin, it's transparent, and then I just mimicked writing and text. And I found, and writing on encaustic work can be kind of tricky. I found some Sharpie makes oil markers. I don't know if you knew that, but that was like a gift. I was like, what? And those work really well with wax. So anybody that works with wax, check out Sharpies. Not all of them are oil, but some of them. And for a while, my local Joanne sold them, and then they gave it up because I think I was the only one that bought them. So I noticed, I went there the other day, and it's like, no, they're gone. So, and then I just stitched it, just bound it in a traditional way with some linen thread. So that's my story. Doesn't really say anything, but just suggests it.
It also smells really good.
It smells like wax when you open up the container that it comes in. You're like, yep. That's what that is. And it does. It's very warm.
Yeah.
You know, the feeling of it, of encaustic. I love it.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would have stitched all that, but my fingers go numb a lot, and I can't do that as much anymore. So I was like, that marker. I know, for some reason this works, but this doesn't. I don't know. Go figure. Anyway, that's mine.
Excellent. Thank you.
Did you have a prevision of what you wanted that to look like, or was it like, oh, that's what we're gonna do?
You know what? I really tried really hard to make, like, I looked up like how traditional books are done, and I made an accordion book, and I made this, I made that, and they were really collagey, and I was like, yeah, that kind of looks okay, and I spent a lot of time doing those, and then this one just like popped out. And I was like, I'm going here. Well, and also I had just made a dress out of paper that I used a lot of this. So I had this scads of this laying around, and that one just came out pretty fast. I don't know. I just got lucky.
It's very pretty.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Harriet Zippel. I'm from Smithton, Illinois, so I'm a bit of a renegade in Missouri fiber artist. I've only been with the group for a couple of years. My basis is I've been a quilter, but I'm wanting to explore the artistic aspect of quilting more. So this is my first book. The name of the project is Contemplatations, and I really drew a blank as far as what am I thinking about? I have no idea what I'm thinking about. But what was in my mind a lot was my family was going through some rough times with my mother, who was 89 at the time, and she was having some issues, having memory issues, etc. And I cannot believe that my phone is ringing. Forgive me for that. Actually, that's my partner in crime, Linda Law, who has a book here, but couldn't make it today. Anyway, so what I ended up doing was thinking about, well, what's really in my mind are these issues we're having with my mother. And so what I did was I thought about the different conversations we had been having. And I went to the essence. It took me a while to figure out what my subjects were going to be, but I wanted to have just the essence of a conversation that was had and not be judgmental about that conversation. And so that's what's reflected in here. And it's in purple, not because I like purple, but because purple is the color of the age. And there's that old tune that when I get old, I shall look purple. And my mom is a purple fan. So it's all hand-dyed fabric, and a lot of the trimmings are also hand-dyed. It's quilted, it's on buckram, is the basis for it. It's one large piece of buckram. And I actually have a picture of what it looks like before it is combined. And here's what it looks like. So I had the top and the bottom. I had to be careful of the sequence of my conversations because some of them flow one from the other. And then I folded it in half and pulled it up. Some of the issues in putting it together, my chimneys didn't quite match, so I put little socks on them so that they look the same. And even though I had made this template very carefully, the edges didn't quite match when I folded them up. So then I decided, well, I'm going to use some cheesecloth to make kind of a thatched roof. And so there it is. It culminates in my mom saying that she's inviting people to her 90th birthday party, and I'm like, party. And so we had to kind of backtrack and figure out who she's invited to this party and where is it going to be and all that. So it was really cathartic for me because it does cover some of the highs and lows of having a parent who is older and what they're going through. So, any questions?
What is holding your house together? You explained to me earlier.
It's buckram, and then I have buckram is used to for the outside binding of books. So it's a rather firm woven fabric, and then there's a layer of batting, and then the cotton fabrics. So there's one cotton fabric that's dyed, and then I layered the others on top of it. And it was enough. I went through several things that I brought along with me, but I don't have with me at the moment, of what kind of material to use to make the book stand, but and not flop, but not be so stiff that you couldn't open it up and read it. So what I end with is, it's been a cathartic experience for me, and my mom is not that much older than me. She was 19 when she had me, so I'm following right in her footsteps, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be having these same conversations with my son someday. So, enjoy. Thank you very much.
Next up is Barry. I'm Barry Mason, and I was overjoyed when MOFA said, oh, artist books. I work in a lot of different textile and fiber mediums, but right now I am a passionate bookmaker, so it's like, yes, this is for me. So I made 5. I couldn't help myself, so it just kept going and going, so I'll make each of them pretty brief. When I look at a through line about my life, I think about in my careers, I think that it's always about telling stories and about evoking particular emotion from whoever is out there. And these books, of course, were what I was thinking and feeling at that time, and to some degree still am. So the first one, I'll take them in order here, is called Home Sweet Home. Both figuratively and literally, so many people in the world are fleeing their homes, their culture, their safety. And maybe it was my exchange student from Ukraine that was the beginning of this, but then I started thinking about it much more globally than that. So it needed to be that there were the language component below this accordion book on some screening, needed to be abstracted so that it could apply to any language, anywhere, because so many people are in that situation. Moving right along, I have two that's called Times Being What They Are, 1, Times Being What They Are, 2. And it is the New York Times. Because when I read a front page and read those stories, the reaction was so visceral. And this is a twofold editorial page. And every story, I want the knowledge. I want to know what's going on. And I want it to be better. And so the hope in these two pieces is the sewing grid upon which, so looking at there are places that the foundation is still there. It could come back, maybe even better. So I don't mean them as a downer, though it started out that way. I'm a felter, so that part was pretty easy. You just kind of felt them, you know, and then they start falling apart. All right, number 4. This is Loving Kindness, which was the piece that I actually did. I'll move it right here for this show. So it's the first thing that started me on this journey. Loving kindness, in the way I use it, is that Buddhist term. And in that same framework, it's more like compassion, wanting happiness for all. I heard someone mention earlier the idea of COVID and its reaction. And it was during that time of lockdown that in my daily journal, which I always have a loving kindness list of individuals that I want to send special thoughts about. I started thinking more globally, though, about all the people who were lonely, the medical workers who were tired, people who were mourning alone and without the rituals that so often help us tie that together. And then, of course, time went on, and I started thinking about it even more globally, about who's hungry, who's injured, and it went on and on. I got an opportunity to use a lot of handmade paper in this particular book, which was fun. Each of the emotions is on handmade paper from my husband's old shirts, but anyway, the idea that they're hanging in a circle, like in a void, hanging literally by a thread, because I think that's how people feel when they're in the depth of one of those emotions or worries or concerns. So again, in an accordion, one hopes that you can pull it together, that things will get better. So I'll move on to my last, but TJ, it's gone at the other end of the room. So we move. I tell stories, and I am also a beginning marbler. So let's put those together. I came and found this particular kind of binding. It's called the dragon scale binding, and I fell in love with it. First of all, just look at the images it makes. Patterns is the name of this particular book. And I'm holding it together. Normally it would have a lovely bow. I would make it look really nice. But I want to do the dramatic reveal. Okay, but the story, okay, this is the title for Amy Lowell's poem, Patterns, which is an anti-war poem, and describes a young woman of a very early time, you know, in a brocade gown, walking through her patterned garden, everything stiff and boned. So I wanted to cover this in brocade. I wanted it to be bound like she feels she is bound by society, etc., because she wants freedom of her fiance and their life together. So it opens, because this is her dream. I'm going to put it up here on the shelf, I guess. Can you see that? Yeah. So I got to show my new skill of my marbling. and you can turn the page and hear her read her story. So I get to practice my hand, lettering. But the point is, it's a way to tell a story. That's what I love about artist books. There are no rules. It doesn't have to open and close. It can do whatever it can to evoke that emotion, to tell that story. This one quite literal, in that I really love that it really does illustrate the poem. Some of the others I've shown you earlier are more abstract, but I'm hoping they evoke an emotion and in some way relate to some story in your life, and therefore they would be successful. Thanks.
Put a pause on that. Put a pause on that. My dress just fell off the wall. Of course it has to be my stuff. So I'm gonna let you just hold it. Can you just hold it? You can be my Vanna White.
Okay.
Hey, am I last?
Yep.
Oh man. So what happened was, first of all, I want to tell you, the ladies, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of the group. Me and Miss Becky met in this spot right here on a day that, of course, America will never forget. I wish that day never happened, but we met here. Becky came over to see my exhibition that I had here. Thanks to the Bunker Center for the Art, this is where I had my second solo exhibition, and I made 21 textiles. Never had an exhibition. I was always told I wasn't good enough, and I had to prove a point to myself that I am good enough and that I'm just as good as the next person. And Vanna White right here is doing it. I love her. So one of the pieces in my exhibition I did was in honor of my grandmother, because my grandmother did not have a Vogue or Simplicity or a McCormick to fit her upright base. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, she was a thick girl. I'm glad my nana was a thick girl. I can lay all up in her. So I did a piece in honor of my grandmother, and it was called Grandma's Dress Pattern. And not realizing what I was doing at that time, I'm thinking I'm just making something in honor of my grandmother to honor her, because I'm sure she didn't have, a pattern. She had to use scraps. My grandmother did pick cotton, so I'm sure she used whatever she had to pick something to make sure she had an outfit to wear. And she was a seamstress. My mother was a seamstress also, and of course they wanted to make me become a seamstress, and I didn't want to be a seamstress. I thought that was stupid. And it still is stupid. But it makes you money, so it ain't that stupid. So I made that dress, and I'm glad that I made a dress. I don't know if anybody had a chance to go see it. She was on display at museum at Perry Fire for an exhibition called Race. And so they asked me to have that piece, and that piece literally hung out there for like a month. I was like, okay, grandma got to come home now. I miss my grandma. And then I also had that piece for a show for Fringe. So I talked about my grandmother picking cotton. I talked about my mother in the garment district for 60 years. It was right downtown. And I had that piece as a storyteller talking about my grandmother sewing and how it got passed down to me. Again, I did not want to be a seamstress, but I'm glad I picked it up in that format, because I know if I had made a pair of pants, it would have had a neck on it. My mom wouldn't be too happy with a pair of pants with a neck. So with that being said, when Becky said, hey, we're doing books, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Well, I just finished my book. I ain't gonna tell y'all when. Anyway, I just finished the book.
Yesterday?
Yeah. I'm an artist too, I get it. She understands. So I was like, oh, this is cool. So I also did a class at Sewing Labs. And they said, hey, can you come in and teach a class? And I'm like, sure, I'll teach a class. Very first class I ever taught. And I said, well, why don't I teach them how to make a dress? It's not one you can wear, but just have a textile dress that was fun. And so this was a pattern. I had hand-drawn my own pattern, made the dress, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever to do that. So I made that dress for that class. And then not too long ago, I did the Afro-American women in jazz. So I did a presentation here, and I talked about 5 Afro-American women in jazz. And this was a group of women that were outdoor women, right? They don't do no sewing machine, crafty stuff. They drink beer and eat hot dogs, kind of women. And so what we did with them was, I said, okay, well, we'll do the dress, we'll do the class, and then I want you guys to come back and make a dress. It was so amazing to see someone take your craft and be so passionate with it. So this was a small dress. Everybody, it was like 6 women, and they all got to make a small dress. And they were just so excited to make that dress. So when Becky said, okay, we can do a book, and I said, well, if I do a book, I got to make it to where it's an educational book. I got to make it to where it's a fun book. I got to make it to where it's something I took when my mom taught me and my grandmother taught me and put it into a book format. So this is my book. Thanks to Dove. Dove, Inspector Gadget, she is. So I said, Dove, can you just look at my book and help me to lay it out? Of course, I did look at YouTube videos. They a lie when you do them at home on your own. Y'all agree with me? I see you. Because it's not the same. So I'm looking, I'm writing. I said, she didn't do that part right. Let me look at it again. But anyway, when I did my book, I was honored to do it, and I was excited to do it. But it was a challenge for me because I'm a textile artist. And I'm a textile artist, but I'm also a performing artist. So I do my textiles, and then I put a story to it. Well, this one, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to be a storyteller first and then do the textile. So I had to go in reverse, which was a challenge. So I did my book, and I'm glad I did it. So, of course, I had to make sure I put all my techniques that I knew in there. So I heard somebody else talk about freeze paper through the printer. I learned that during COVID. I'm telling you, COVID was bad, but it was a good-ass thing. It really helped me and challenged me to put my artwork together. So on all my pages, I did all the quilting first, and then I put, like, the recipe in there also. So I was like, this is really cool to do a recipe. So I took the exact same thing I did in my class and put it into my book. So if anybody wants to make a dress, they got the book. So they get to buy the book. Let me say that lighter. They get to buy the book to make the dress. But it was really cool. Like I said, it was a challenge. So I laid it out as if you were elementary to help you step by step to do it. And of course, TJ is like getting all the threads and stuff. He's real close, but it's okay. So it's like, I think it's like 12 steps for you to do it. And again, to lay it out and to do my very own, I call it a recipe. To do my very own recipe, I thought was so amazing. And then as I was doing research, I found old patterns because I thought that was like the most fun part, to take an old pattern, because I didn't want to use my mama's because she would have came back and got me. And y'all know how your mama come back and get you. And I thought it was really cool, so I laid it out to the best of my ability. And then, of course, I asked Inspector Gadget to look at it. And she said, you should have did this. And I said, okay, well, I didn't do that. But it was so good to quilt it all out and then to say, this is the completion of my book. But here's the best part. So you get to close the mess up and put a thing on it. Let me show you. Ta-da. And then that's the finished dress. So thank you guys. Thank you, Becky. I appreciate you. And this is really cool. So this is my good side. Well, it's really this side. Hold on. Oh. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. This was fun. Thanks to the bunker for allowing us to host this. And I hope those that are chiming in, you come down and see the exhibition. How long are we up until?
The 30th.
30th. So come tomorrow. Are we open tomorrow? We ain't open tomorrow?
No, but if you message me, I'll let you in.
Did you hear what TJ said? If you message me, he'll let you in. That's $24.95 plus unlocking the door, though. Thank you, guys. This was good.
Thank you.